Let's get started.
Your mic.
I think it's on, because we decided I couldn't turn mine off. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Public hearing for our 2017-2018 budget. It's Tuesday, June 13th at 6 p.m. Other than Miss Gloria Moore, no one signed up to speak, so you're on.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. Good evening. Since we presented the budget in April, we have finally gotten some final numbers from the state, and we wanted to update your information so that you would know everything that we know. You should have at your place an exhibit that says final projections, and you'll see that this is a lesser projection. We have decreased the amount that we're asking for in local taxes by $665,000. And that is a result of some increases in the state funding. We got the final numbers on the base student costs, so you'll see that those numbers have increased by the state sources have increased by $128,000, and then the transfers in the bottom section of the revenue have increased by $105,000. But the biggest change is on the expenditure side, so that's on the second page. We, in the Senate version of the budget, the state is covering the 1% of the retirement increase. And the way that they're going to do that, I don't know if they told you all the same thing they told us, but we're getting a 1% credit on our remittance to the retirement system. So the first quarter of next year, we should see a credit of $676,750. So we have subtracted that from our expenditures. So our net request from you is $65,797,636. Yeah, 65 million, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, boy, it's going to be a cheap year next year.
Yeah. Yes, get it on the record for the right amount. Any questions?
Madam Chair, if I may. Does this reflect increases to salary increases for teacher salaries? Or
It does.
anything more than the standard that y'all have been giving, or is this?
There is a 1% increase for all employees. We also, at the direction of the board last night, increased the salary schedule, the very lowest of our salary schedule, because when we look at our neighboring districts, we are in the lowest of those, and we have a really hard time keeping custodians and other food service workers, so that is included in this updated version also.
Okay. Are the food service workers, are they still employed by y'all, or is it?
Some of them are,
Sodexo,
yes,
okay.
about half and half right now.
Okay.
As
And y'all are
ours-
continuing the same contract with Sodexo as y'all?
We are,
Yeah, okay.
yes.
Was that a percent, do you know what percent that was to your I guess it mainly just reflected your custodians, correct?
It's custodians, food service workers, folks that are aides in the classrooms. So it's our three lowest tiers, and we did, in addition to the 1%, we did 5% for the very lowest. So our first step in that group that is the custodians and food service workers is still just under $10 an hour.
Correct.
So
Okay.
that was our goal. Then the second tier got an additional 3%, and then the third tier got an additional 1%. And the total of that was about $200,000 for all the people that are in those three categories. And the reason for the 1% for everyone, our employees are going to get an increase in the retirement contribution that they have to do. And so we thought 1% would kind of keep them from having to go into actually getting less money this year than in the prior year.
So by receiving a little bit more from the state than what you're used to. Does that change any projection out on any of your build outs or anything like that, that it looks like, or is that just helping a little bit on the retirement side of things that y'all were having to fund?
It's helping on the retirement for sure, but we did get additional funding in the base student cost. $128,000 in the state revenue, that if you look at that front number. They are helping with the fringe benefits just a tad. The 1% that was left that we're not getting the credit for is coming through our EIA and EFA formula, so it doesn't equate to 1%.
And the goal of some of that reserve, is that going back into your fund balance
It
to help
will.
try to get that back built up?
We did leave the $500,000 to go back to the fund balance in this budget.
Okay,
So, yes.
good. Thank you. That's all I have.
I know that everything increases, but at 2010, it was 56 million, and now it's right at 66 million in 7 years or 8 years. And from last year to this year, it's $3 million. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. 2.7, that's correct.
Is there any time that we can start weaning this off to where it doesn't keep growing and growing and growing?
I can't answer that. I mean, salaries go up, our insurance goes up. I'm sure your budget's the same way.
We had to make changes such as increasing class size and those kind of things. That's
Right,
where it
that would be.
because 88% of ours is in personnel. So if you looked at with teachers and that, we have the best class size in the area.
Well, I got another question. How do we rank in the state
In what?
in education? Where do we perform?
It depends on which area you're looking at. We have, there were some yesterday at the board retreat where we're in the, There were some areas yesterday when we did our board retreat, and Ms. Hopkins presented out where we are in the top 10 in scores, and there are some where we're more to the middle of the pack. So it varies by, there are multiple assessments that they take. There are multiple measures that the state uses. Some we're in the top 10, some we're not. We're not in the bottom quartile in any, but we're not where the board wants to be as far as being a consistent top 10 district in all those measures.
Another question. I was watching TV, and out of the top 30 countries in the world, the United States spends more money on their students than anyone. You know where we rank out of them 30?
Probably close to 30.
28. That's all I have.
Madam Chair. So you're asking the taxpayers to come up with an extra $3 million?
Yes, we are. I mean,
We ain't got it. And we can't even give our county employees a pay raise.
I understand, I do understand, but, the numbers are what they are, and we're here to ask in good faith, and just ask you to consider it.
That's roughly a $3 million increase.
We're not, we don't know, we don't know what the value of the meal is. That's part of the difficulty with doing the budget at the time we do it. So,
You came to us before, said there's gonna be no millage increase, no nothing, it'd be same as last year. And now we're here at the almost public hearing, and now we gotta have a $3 million increase.
as we said we would hope to keep it at 110.1. Again, we don't know what the value of a meal will return on that with reassessment.
Madam Chair? Do we have any idea, is there an estimate after reassessment where it'll be? Will there be, are y'all requesting a millage increase, or you're just saying,
We're saying the number, we're not gonna ask you for more than 110.1 mil, no. But depends on the value of the mill, how that works out. You may have to declare one if, depending upon what it shows after reassessment. We understand that.
okay,
It still has to show as a
Sure.
tax increase. But no, we're not asking for it to go to 113.1.
okay,
No. We'll give you the two numbers so you see what the full budget looks like.
okay. I'm just making sure that we're not asking, the district's not asking for a millage increase. I was just clarifying.
Right.
Okay.
We're not asking for a millage increase, where are we getting the money?
It's my understanding the assumption would be that the value of the mill has increased to cover the increased costs of the budget, or the increase in budget. Is that right?
That is what
Oh.
our hope would be, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We understand that may not be the case.
Then what happens, Paul, what happens if it doesn't?
Go into our fund balance.
Yeah.
Mr. Moeller, can you shed light on this?
Yes, sir. I mean, I can clarify that in the past, they've always asked to maintain the millage at the current level. They have submitted a budget with hopes that the reassessment and the value of a mill will see an increase, allowing them to recover the benefit of that increased value of a mill. In the event that the value of a mill or the dollars generated through the millage rate does not satisfy their request for local tax revenue, then they'll compensate for that loss of expected revenue by going into their fund balance and maintain the current spending plan as they presented. We can shed a little bit of light on the fact that we are anticipating an increase due to reassessment, but we have to be mindful that it is a rollback year due to reassessment. Therefore, we'll have to roll the millage back to a revenue neutral format, minus the allowed increases by the state law, meaning if through CPI and growth, they're allowed to roll back only to, or we're allowed to roll back only to what we could have recovered through CPI and growth. So, taking a look at this, we don't have the final reassessment numbers in. I know as of this week, they're running the cap calculations, which is the maximum allowed increase that we're allowed over a 5-year period that was put in place by Act 388. And they're actually running those cap calculations this week. So hopefully we're getting closer to having some final numbers. Reassessment notices are due to go out in August. So we're, of course, continuing those calculations. So I think it's, they've made it evident before and tonight they're not asking for a tax increase. So if the revenues don't come in at this particular level, they'll make adjustments in their fund balance and spending plan to accommodate what revenues they do receive off of the millage rate.
Ms. Moore, in the future, I guess y'all, not us, but y'all are gonna have to look at reconfiguring maybe reconfiguring your budget to cut back on building, so you'll have more money for,
But building is not in this budget, and we can't use the money that we use
but
for
you can
building
you
for
can
this.
reconfigure the way you allot the millage.
That's fair enough, we could.
I mean,
I
I'm
mean,
not. I'm
what
not
would
coming-
happen, what you're saying is instead of having 31 mills for debt, we could lower that millage, have less
Yes.
capital projects, and then you, as a council, would be willing to increase the debt, the tax on, for operations. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if you, it's like, we used to say about Rabbit Lockwood, one of the harbor pilots, steal a quarter out of one pocket, put it in the other pocket.
Right.
It's, we facing some pretty bad times now. We got, you got Kmart gone under, Radio Shack done gone under, and in the industry, everybody keeps painting a rosy picture, but in reality, General, Westinghouse is in Chapter 11 now. And we, there's too much uncertainty, that's what, I guess what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to make it hard on y'all, I'm not trying to browbeat you, step on you, or anything like that, because I realize that you're in a position where you gotta maintain quality people and expectations of education. So I hear what you're saying, it's just that we're gonna have to maybe down the road look at some other things.
Well, you're right, there are choices to make, and like Mr. Hamby said, some of those choices involve changing how we staff our schools and how other,
Well, not so much staffing as the building, more buildings. And I want to leave you with one word. By the way, your new Walhalla School looks the same as the Charleston Naval Brig, even to the color in Charleston, in Goose Creek. So I thought you'd appreciate that.
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Anything else? Anything else? Any other questions, comments, complaints? All right, well,
Motion to close ordinance 2017-01. You want them at each time?
I think that was actually
02.
I know, but I'm just saying, do you want me to close each one of them at each time, or do you want them to close it?
I believe Ms. Kamick essentially de facto opened all three of them up at one time, since we only had one speaker signed up. So if it's done, you can just close public hearings down and
Okay,
all three, and then we can move on to other in here.
okay.
other,
Any other discussions?
So motion to close ordinance 2017-01, motion to close ordinance 2017-02, and ordinance 2017-03.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I do have a question though for Scott. In our new budget document, on page, do you have that with you?
Yes, ma'am.
Page 11, under interest and investment income, what exactly is administrative investment accounts?
We have a number of different investment accounts based on the funds and where the monies are held. The administrative investment account is one of the accounts that the treasurer manages, and that is one that's not a long-term account. I believe that's one that's actually done on a, short-term basis. It's funds that are kept here from an operating capital standpoint, and he invests that, repeatedly through smaller investments, whereas like your multi-bank investment accounts, the larger amount is where he puts in over the long-term investments and opportunities there, and puts the bulk of the money in. I don't know exactly which funds he puts in that administrative account. I can certainly get that information since he manages those primarily according to the state statute, but I can certainly get a breakdown of each one of those and exactly where the money comes from and
Okay, I was just wondering why the difference is over time. Well, first I didn't know what it meant, and then I was wondering why the difference is over time.
yeah, depending on where the treasurer actually invests the funds. So for example, you're looking at, I think through the multi-bank investment accounts, more long-term investment opportunities for a larger sum of the money, if you will. He kind of pools all of the monies together and then invests them in different pieces here and there. Some he sweeps the accounts overnight. So basically he'll have a balance in all the accounts that he keeps here, and then the investment firm will sweep them and then invest them overnight in the market and then put the money back in the morning. Then he's got long-term accounts, he's got some local CDs, so he's got so many different investment accounts, almost like a very diverse portfolio, if you will, of investment. And I believe, like I said, that administrative account is either part of the sweeping or is part of the local CDs and investments like that. And then your multi-bank investment accounts is your long-term investments for multi-years. But again, I don't claim to be an expert in what he does, because he manages that on his own as he's required. But I can certainly, if you'd like, request a breakdown of the investment strategy and where the money's come from and how they're invested, if you like.
Okay. That's the only question I have. Anybody else have anything to say?
Yeah, Scott, if you, Madam Chair, if I may. Scott, talked about it briefly today on the communications increase and as well as on the increase on the sheriff's side of things. And I just wanted to kind of let you give a brief discussion on, I guess, in relation to the increase that was given last year, how that affects us this year going forward, as well as what we're going to see like in the 2019 timeframe with those increases from there.
Madam Chair?
What page is that on?
It would actually be,
Communications is number 22.
yeah,
But I'll speak in general terms of all of the sheriff's departments. Mr. Davis called me today asking about the increases at that point specifically with the communications. And I had identified to him that the salary and wages was the primary source of that increase. And then we looked at the sheriff, detention center, animal control, and other sheriff-operated departments. And I had identified to him that the majority of those increases were due to the salary restructure plan. And he asked, well, why would that not have been in this current budget year? That's when we actually implemented it, because the decision this year was made to provide that increase based on an anniversary date. So we weren't carrying the full cost of a year, as if they all got the increase on July 1. So therefore, we saw another slight increase to fiscal year 18 in those salary lines as well, in order to compensate for the full carry cost. And if I remember correctly, it was about a 55 to 45% breakdown. So 55% of the expense was in this year, and then 45 remaining coming in next year added on top of that. For fiscal year 19, since we will have already reflected the full carry cost in fiscal year 18, there shouldn't be an increase in salaries for those departments going into fiscal year 19. Those salaries should stabilize at the current fiscal year 18 level. I'm assuming that's what you were looking for?
that is,
Okay.
yeah. I just wanted to make sure that everybody up here kind of understood kind of what we were seeing on that it wasn't a increase this year. It was a continued on what was voted on prior to this budget coming through, that we're starting to see the how to settle that, because that was some increases that I was not necessarily prepared to see, and then I understand now that it was part of that salary restructure through the sheriff's office, so. That's it, that's all I have.
Anybody else? You good?
Are we voting on these tonight, or third reading is, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, so we've always customarily held our public hearings for the budget, at least one of them on an individual standalone night with no other business, and primarily all we're here to do is hear the budget comments. And then we'll have third and final reading at the next council meeting, and a public hearing prior to that meeting as well, or as part of that meeting.
I did have one more, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. The addition that we were looking at for the fire perspective, I saw where that 275,000,
31?
I'm looking for it, it's in
Page
fire.
34?
34, yeah. The new position, the $245,000 that we have in there. You're confident that, I guess, everything, that the ability to do this relies on taking some other positions away to where this is not going to be a one-time money that we're going to have to use to do that? You feel comfortable moving forward, even going into 2019, 2020 budgets, we can continue that without any kind of increases?
Well, I mean, obviously, anytime you add an expense to the budget, you have to worry about carrying those costs every year, especially on a recurring expense. Now, we've gone through and identified the reduction in force. There's 15 positions, and we've got some continued work to do on that, but you got the 15 positions, so you're replacing that same annual recurring cost that you were spending elsewhere with this new cost here. So it's almost as if it's a net zero change with regard to salary. Now, the savings and the reduction are gonna be more significant than what we're adding back in for this 245. So you still have some long-term net savings over time by eliminating those positions each year.
Okay. And if we're ever looking to increase our debt millage, we're going to have to either stop on the operating side of things to move back over any money over, any millage, any debt millage back over, because we moved debt millage over to the operations, which, works out for this year, but it limits our capital projects. So if we want to go back to that, we're gonna have to lower our operating expenditures even more.
Not entirely. Let me touch base on that. Yes, we made an adjustment to how we allocate our millages, right? We reduced the debt millage down to 3.2. We increased the general fund millage, but we also increased the Tri-County Tech Fund millage as well by 0.9, and then reduced the economic development millage down. So there was some adjustments amongst the funds. To answer your questions, specifically, yes, by moving the debt millage over from the debt millage to the general fund and elsewhere, you now have limited your ability to borrow money and do capital projects with those without a tax increase. Not so technically, but you do have one additional outstanding bond payment that is going to roll off in the next couple of years. So with me saying you'd have to increase taxes technically isn't correct, because then you have some of that millage is going to be freed up when that particular bond payment the last payment is made. So you basically, in my opinion, if you look at the current payments and look at the current structure, you could potentially borrow $6 million or so come 2 years from now without having to raise taxes or have that millage freed up to do with it what you will, if you want to move it over to another fund or whatever, or borrow money. So technically and not so technically, it's a yes and no question.
Right. Yeah, because I think one of my biggest concerns is moving forward, any kind of capital projects, you're very limited for the next 2 years in what you can accomplish from a capital project standpoint, due to the budget restraints that we're currently under, until some of these other projects finish up, or the value of a mill increases, or some of our industry begins to come online and create additional revenue, correct?
Correct. And just to kind of give you, more specific, so like in fiscal year 2018, we will make a final payment on a bond, and our total bond payments at that particular time will go from 1.7 down to 1.1 million. So basically what I'm saying is you free up that $600,000 worth of annual payment that now you can apply to a new issuance of bonds without having to raise the millage, just to give you more specific numbers.
As long as we don't continue to add new stuff to fill that need, I guess, so, okay. Thank you.
Is there anything else?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to thank Mr. Mulder and his team for bringing a budget in that I know we continue to spend and spend and spend, and you have been able to this point to cut and cut and cut. I know it's not been easy, and I do recognize that that's not an easy job, and we appreciate you not telling us we have to raise taxes, but at some point, we cannot, and to this body, we cannot continue to spend and spend and spend and expect there to be just more fat in the budget. I mean, we're going to have to, if we're going to continue to spend, we're going to have to look at increasing revenue somehow in the future. So just looks like we're okay again this year, but we've cut a lot of fat, and we've probably cut through all the meat, and now we're starting to get down to the bone. And what I would hate to see is service quality to start suffering because of the cuts that are being made to accommodate council's wishes. So just hope that we'll be mindful of that as we go through these budget cycles. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anybody else? All right,
Motion to adjourn?
that's good to me.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.